is entitled Brother, My Brother. Ms. Lampkin.
This piece, Brother, My Brother, is, as Mr. McIntosh said, from the musical The Civil War. It's about two people in the Civil War, the blue and the gray, people on the north, people on the south, and the feelings between them.
Thank you, choir. Thank you, Ms. Lampker. This time, I'm privileged to introduce Ms. Michelle Clark, who will be telling you the story of Veterans Day. Michelle?
Veterans Day, how it was named. A soldier known but to God. In 1921, an American soldier, his name known but to God, was buried on a Virginia hillside overlooking the Potomac River and the city of Washington. The Arlington National Cemetery burial site of this unknown World War I soldier celebrated ending of World War I hostilities at 11 a.m. November 11, 1918, the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. The day became known as Armistice Day. Armistice Day officially received its name in America in 1926 through a congressional resolution. It became a national holiday 12 years later by similar congressional action. To honor veterans of all wars, an answer to the dilemma of how to pay tribute to those who had served in World War II came in a proposal to change Armistice Day to Veterans Day and make this an occasion to honor those who had served in all wars. President Eisenhower in 1954 signed the bill proclaiming November 11 as Veterans Day, and he called for Americans everywhere to rededicate themselves to the cause of peace.
Thank you, Michelle. And Veterans Day will be observed officially on Saturday. Of course, we don't have school Saturday. That's why we're doing our program today. Anyone here ever been to Washington, D.C. and gone to the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier? Okay. I had the privilege to visit the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier 2 years ago. It's a very solemn place in Washington, D.C. in Arlington National Cemetery. And if you know the story about the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, just recently they interred remains of a Vietnam memorial, Vietnam War soldier, and now there's some controversy that that person is not unknown, and so I'm not sure how they're going to handle that. But the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, if you ever get to Washington, D.C., is definitely a spot to go to because it's a really impressive place, and it's a place where many millions of people visit to pay respect to our veterans who have given the ultimate sacrifice for the freedoms that we now enjoy. At this time, I'm pleased to introduce Jimmy Kastner, and Jim will be telling you the story of Taps. And following that, I will ask you then to rise, and we'll have a moment of silence, and then Brad Laufenberg will be playing Taps. Jim?
It all began in 1862 during the Civil War when a Union Army Captain Robert E. Lecumby was with his men near Harrison's Landing in Virginia. The Confederate Army was on the other side of a narrow strip of land. During the night, Captain E. Lecumby heard the mourn of the soldier who lay mortally wounded in the field. Not knowing if it was a Union or a Confederate soldier, the captain decided to risk his own life and bring the stricken man back for medical attention. Crawling on his stomach through the fire, the captain reached the stricken soldier and began pulling him towards his encampment. When the captain finally reached his own lines, he discovered it was actually a Confederate soldier, but the soldier was dead. The captain lit a lantern. Suddenly, he caught his breath and went numb with shock. In the dim light, he saw the face of a soldier. It was his own son. The boy had been studying music in the South when the war broke out. Without telling his father, he had enlisted in the Confederate Army. The following morning, his heartbroken father asked permission of his superiors to give his son a full military burial, despite his enemy status. His request was partially granted. The captain asked if he could have a group of Army band members play his funeral bridge for the son at the funeral. That request was turned down since the soldier was a Confederate. Out of respect for his father, they did say they could give him one musician. The captain chose a bugler. He asked the bugler to play a series of musical notes he had found on a piece of paper in the pocket of dead youth's uniform. This wish was granted. The music was the haunting bugle memory that we now know as taps, used at all military funerals.
Thanks, Jim. At this time, to pay honor to our veterans, I would ask all of you to rise. And we will observe a moment of silence first, to be followed by taps. Councilman Eric Solberg and Sarah Dahl, if you want to come on up here. Okay, Spencer.
The tradition of honoring our veterans began in 1919 as Armistice Day, to recognize those who died fighting in the First World War. Congress broadened the scope of this national holiday in 1954 to honor all veterans. Clearly, we take this opportunity to honor those veterans who fought in our nation's wars. But a veteran is also that soldier, sailor, airman, Marine, and Coast Guardsman who served during peacetime, either on active duty or in reserve components. Our veterans represent those who were drafted and those who voluntarily signed up. And finally, on this day, we appreciate those men and women serving in today's military, those who will be tomorrow's veterans. They have inherited the defense of our nation and stand guard in the shadow of their predecessors.
Today we honor past, current, and future veterans. They do their jobs so well that we as a nation feel safe and secure from a very dangerous world. In fact, we feel so protected that it's easy to forget about those who have stood guard throughout the years. We lead busy lives, and it's natural, because we're all human, to lose our national memory or to overlook the meaning of their service. That is why holidays like this are so critically important. Just a little more than 3 months ago, on June 25th, the nation commemorated the 50th anniversary of the beginning of the Korean War in Washington at the Korean War Veterans Memorial. The 19 stainless steel statues, 14 soldiers, 1 sailor, 1 airman, and 3 Marines looked on as the words engraved in the nearby granite wall declared, "Freedom is not free." More than 1.5 million Americans served in Korea during the 3-year war, a war that successfully prevented North Korea from conquering the South. And since that time, many people who are now today's veterans stood guard to ensure their continued safety. Tomorrow's veterans are still on watch there, serving as a forceful deterrent during hardship tours away from their families.
Anniversaries such as this are but small tokens of a grateful nation. Meanwhile, a monument is being planned for our World War II veterans, who are now passing away from us at the rate of 1,000 per day. Our collective memory of them has recently been awakened. Tom Brokaw's The Greatest Generation illustrates veterans' contributions to building the nation during the post-war years. And Steven Spielberg's motion picture, Saving Private Ryan, paints a clear image of the horrible price of war, a price our veterans so bravely paid. Accounts such as these leave no doubt, even for the casual observer, about the enormous debt that we all owe to the men and women of the 1940s. Their service and sacrifice have no parallel in human history and have stood as a source of inspiration and awe for all of those who have tried to follow in their footsteps since the victories of 1945. We are a grateful nation, remembering veterans' sacrifices and service in both war and peace, in both far-off lands and right here on the American home front. You might ask veterans of the Vietnam War what years they were, or if they hear from any of their old buddies. In the case of the Vietnam War veteran, sometimes they need a lot of approval. It helps for them to know that you understand that they were there at America's request, not theirs, and that they performed admirably. Maybe you'll run into veterans of the Persian Gulf War. You might ask them how long they were deployed, or note how it was amazing that they responded so quickly to such a sudden and dramatic crisis.
You might talk to a young soldier who just left the army after serving in Bosnia, where he or she shielded a village from a horrible violence and destruction. The point is that we should show our appreciation to all of our veterans when the opportunity arises, not just on formal days of recognition such as today. Today's veterans share wisdom that can only come from wartime experiences. Whether they returned from war as heroes or they were ignored or forgotten, they came home changed. Whether or not they got the hero's welcome they deserved, it's not too late to show our appreciation now, today, and every day. Whether they continue to fight their battles through their nightmares and memories, or through more apparent physical or emotional disabilities, veterans deserve to know that we as a people honor their service. Please honor their sacrifice pay tribute each day to their irreplaceable gift to our nation. And take a moment to thank tomorrow's veterans. It's never too early to let them know how deeply we recognize their passionate commitment to help America safe. Before we close today, I would like to ask all veterans in the audience, if we have any, to stand and be recognized. Okay. Each of you knows only too well that freedom is not free. A grateful nation thanks you.
You may clap. Matt doesn't know this, but I'm going to have him do something here also. As Jennifer commented in her part of the speech about the Korean Memorial, Korean War Memorial in Washington, D.C. Has anybody seen that? Again, I had the privilege to see that 2 years ago, and I saw it at night, and the statues, how many of them are there? 16 of them? 14. 14 are 1.5 life size, so they're quite large. And I saw them at night, and it was kind of a foggy, dark, rainy night, and it was very eerie. And they're set up in a V, like the military goes on patrol, and you have one man in front, a point man, and then 2 men, and then 3 men, and then 4 men, and then 3 men, and then 2 men, and then 1 man. And it was quite eerie to see them at night. And then we went back the next day and saw them in the daylight, and it was a completely different memorial, day to night, night to day. It was eerie how it changed from the nighttime to the daytime. And it's a very realistic portrayal of what those men went through, the fear, the danger that they faced, and that, as it said, freedom is not free. And that's why I'm going to ask Matt to read a poem. And this poem was written by a young high school girl down in Florida, I think it was, Captain Kelly Strong. And she's in the ROTC program down at the high school in Florida. But the name of the poem that Matt's going to read is Freedom is Not Free. So, Matt.
Freedom is not free. I watched the flag pass by one day. It fluttered in the breeze. A young Marine saluted it, and then he stood at ease. I looked at him in uniform, so young, so tall, so proud. With hair cut square and eyes alert, he'd stand out in any crowd. I thought of how many men like him had fallen through the years. How many died on foreign soil? How many mothers' tears? How many pilots' planes shot down? How many died at sea? How many foxholes were soldiers' graves? No, freedom is not free. I heard the sound of taps one night when everything was still. I listened to the bugler play and felt a sudden chill. I wondered just how many times the taps had meant amen when a flag had draped a coffin of a brother or a friend. I thought of all the children, of the mothers and the wives, of fathers, sons, and husbands with interrupted lives. I thought about a graveyard at the bottom of the sea, of unmarked graves in Arlington. No, freedom is not free.
I'd like to express a special appreciation to Ms. Lancer and the choir for performing this morning, also to Mrs. Mann and Mr. Roloff for technical help, and also to Libby Klatt and Matt and Michelle, Jimmy, Spencer, Jennifer, Eric, and Sarah for participating in this program. Didn't they do a nice job? How about a nice round of applause for that? We are now taking our program on the road. We are now getting on a bus and going to Maryland to perform at 9:15 at Lincoln East. And this concludes our performance this morning, our Veterans Day Assembly. We thank you for your respectful attendance this morning and your respectful attention, and we will dismiss this way. Mr. Morse, you want to take your elementary students out of here first, and then we'll dismiss 7th grade and then 8th grade. Thank you again.
veterans for joining us today to honor our nation's veterans. We ask that you listen attentively and respectfully to our speakers this morning. Your cooperation will in itself honor our veterans. Once again, welcome.
Thanks, Elizabeth. This time I'd like to have Matt Brantner come up. And just a reminder, as we do the Pledge of Allegiance or at ball games, as the band and Mr. Roloff does the Star-Spangled Banner, it's proper and only fitting that to honor America and to honor our flag and to honor the ladies and gentlemen who have given so dearly over the years for the freedoms we enjoy, that it is proper to stand erect, head tall, shoulders up, put your right hand over your heart, face the flag, and speak clearly when we speak the pledge this morning that we're going to, or at ball games when we do the Star-Spangled Banner. So at this time, I'd introduce Matt Brantner and ask all of you to stand and join the Matt.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Matt. This time, I'd like to introduce Mr. Brad Laufenberg, and Brad will be telling you a little bit about where the National Anthem came from. Brad?
Francis Scott Key wrote the words to the Star-Spangled Banner on September 14th, Guardment of Fort McHenry. The fort guarded the entrance to Baltimore Harbor, while on a mission to secure the release of a Maryland physician who had been kept. Key was held on one of the frigates which would participate in the attack on Fort McHenry during the night of September 13th through the 14th, 1814. Helplessly, Key watched as the bombardment lasted through the night. No one knew if the Americans could hold the strategic fort. When dawn finally arrived, the American flag still flew over the battered fort, visible evidence that the British bombardment failed to destroy the fort or dislodge the Americans. Key's song was quickly accepted as one of the patriotic songs of his generation. On March 3rd, 1931, the Star-Spangled Banner became our country's national anthem when it was signed into law by President Herbert Hoover. The music to which Key set the Star-Spangled Banner is from the Old English song, The Onyxian in Heaven.
Thank you, Brad. At this time, the Lincoln High School Band, under the direction of Mr. Lance Roloff, will be playing the National Anthem. And at this time, I would ask all of you to stand. During the national anthem. Thank you, Mr. Roloff. Thank you, Dan. And today, during our Veterans Program to honor America and to honor our veterans, the Lincoln High Band, again under the direction of Mr. Lance Roloff, will be playing the Navy Hymn. And the Navy Hymn is arranged by Mr. James Boyer. You have some words? Thank you.
Good morning. Each branch of the armed services here in the United States has its own song. The Army has the caisson song, the Navy has Anchors Aweigh, the Marines have the Marines Hymn, and the Air Force has the U.S. Air Force song. The Coast Guard has Semper Paratus. All of these songs are marches. These songs honor the men and women who serve and have served in these branches of the armed services. Another service song is unique. That is the Navy Hymn. I've never been at sea during a battle, but I have been at sea during a strong storm, and I can tell you that the ocean is a strange, foreign, and frightening place to be for those of us that have spent most of our lives on dry land. In the middle of the 19th century, John B. Dykes wrote a hymn tune named Eternal Father, Strong to Save, to reflect some of those feelings. This music is often used for burial services at sea, and so honors the veterans that have paid the highest price in the service of our country. Many verses by many different people have been added to this song since it was first written, but here's the very first. Eternal Father, strong to save, whose arm doth send the restless wave, who bids the mighty ocean deep its own appointed limits keep. O hear us when we cry to thee for those in peril on the sea. At this time, the Lincoln High School Band will perform Eternal Father, Strong to Save, later renamed the Navy Hymn.
close curtains for a couple of minutes while we set up the stage. Thank you. With the band. Well, when Michelle gets here, she will be doing the story of Veterans Day. The loss of life and the loss of loved ones through the POW situation. Okay, we're ready. Again, I'd like to introduce Michelle Clark, and she will be presenting the story of Veterans Day.
Veterans Day, how it was named. A soldier known but to God. In 1921, an American soldier, his name known but to God, was buried on a Virginia hillside overlooking the Potomac River and the city of Washington. The Arlington National Cemetery burial site of this unknown World War I soldier became the personification of dignity and reverence for America's veterans. Similar ceremonies occurred earlier in England and France, where an unknown soldier was buried in each nation's highest place of honor. In England, Westminster Abbey; in France, the Arc de Triomphe. These memorial gestures all took place on November 11th, giving universal recognition to the celebrated ending of World War I hostilities at 11 a.m. November 11th, 1918, the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. The day became known as Armistice Day. Armistice Day officially received its name in America in 1926 through a congressional resolution. It became a national holiday 12 years later by similar congressional action. If the idealistic hope had been realized that World War I was the war to end all wars, November 11th might still be called Armistice Day. But shortly after the holiday was proclaimed, World War II broke out in Europe and shattered the dream. 16.5 million Americans took part. 406,000 died. The families and friends of these dead longed for a way to honor their memory. To honor veterans of all wars. In answer to the dilemma of how to pay tribute to those who had served in this latest Great War came in a proposal made by Representative Edwin K. Reese of Kansas. Change Armistice Day to Veterans Day, and make this an occasion to honor those who have served America in all wars. President Eisenhower in 1954 signed the bill proclaiming November 11th as Veterans Day, and he called for Americans everywhere to rededicate themselves to the cause of peace. On May 30th, 1958, 2 more unidentified American war dead were brought to Arlington Cemetery from overseas and interred in the plaza beside their comrade of World War I. One was killed in World War II, the other in Korea. A law passed in 1973 provided for the interment of an unknown American who lost his life in Southeast Asia during the Vietnam era. For several years, no qualifying remains were discovered, so a memorial plaque was placed in the amphitheater's memorial display room. On Memorial Day 1984, however, the unknown serviceman from that conflict was placed in honored glory alongside his fellow countrymen. To honor these men, symbolic of all Americans who gave their lives in all wars, an Army Honor Guard, the 3D United States Infantry, the Old Guard, keeps day and night vigil.
This time I call upon Jimmy Kastner to come up, and Jimmy will be reading the story of Taps. We will follow his reading of the story of Taps by a moment of silence, and then the playing of Taps by Brad Laufenberg. Jimmy.
It all began in 1862 during the Civil War when a Union Army Captain Robert Eli Cumbie was with his men near Harrison's Landing in Virginia. The Confederate Army was on the other side of a narrow strip of land. During the night, Captain Eli Cumbie heard the mourn of a soldier who lay mortally wounded on the field. Not knowing if it was a Union or a Confederate soldier, the captain decided to risk his own life and bring the stricken soldier back for medical attention. Crawling on his stomach through the gunfire, the captain reached the stricken soldier and began pulling him toward the encampment. When the captain finally reached his own lines, he discovered it was actually a Confederate soldier, but the soldier was dead. The captain lit a lantern. Suddenly he caught his breath and went numb with shock. In the dim light, he saw the face of the soldier. It was really his own son. The boy had been studying music in the South when the war broke out. Without telling his father, he enlisted in the Confederate Army. The following morning, the heartbroken father asked permission of his superiors to give his son a full military burial despite his enemy status. His request was partially granted. The captain had asked if he could have a group of Army band members play a funeral dirge for his son at the funeral. That request was turned down since the soldier was a Confederate. Out of respect for his father, they did say that he could give him one musician. The captain chose a bugler. He asked the bugler to play a series of musical notes he had found on a piece of paper in the pocket of the dead youth's uniform. This wish was granted. The music was the haunting bugle melody that is now known as taps, used at all military funerals.
Thank you, Jimmy. Once again, to honor America, to honor our Veterans today on this Veterans Day, I would ask all in attendance to please rise. We will have a moment of silence, followed by playing a tap by Brad Laufenberg. A moment of silence. Seated. Thank you, Brent. At this time, the Lincoln High School Choir, under the direction of Sarah Lamphere, will be presenting a selection from an American musical, The Civil War, an American Musical, arranged by Mr. Ed Wojcicki. The selection is called Brother, My Brother. Do you have any comments, Ms. Lamphere?
The selection we have chosen today, Brother, My Brother, tells of the blue and the gray, one person from the north and from the south, and the way that they interact and the way that they feel about having to fight each other, being brothers.
Squire, and thank you, Ms. Lanfear. That was outstanding. Appreciate it. At this time, I'd like to introduce Matt Brantner again, and Matt will be introducing our veterans this morning. Matt?
I'll have you guys stand up and be acknowledged when I call your name. Okay, our first veteran is Ted Jeneke. He served in the Army Infantry in the European Theater. Ray Waters, Army Air Force. He flew 35 missions over Germany. James Cummings, 6 years Navy in the South Sea. Ray Nevins, Army, Saipan and Iwo Jima. Francis Michaels, he was a medic in the 117th Infantry in Germany. Martin Kalina, in the Aviation Engineers in the Pacific. John Stasny, Air Force, in Europe during the Korean War. Joe Galaner, Navy, in the Pacific. Bill Godey, Army, in the Europe and Korea. Let's give all our veterans another round of applause.
This time I'd like to introduce our guest speakers this morning, Spencer Easy, Jennifer Lecterhand, Eric Solberg, and Sarah Gower. Spencer?
Veterans Day is a unique and special day for America. While Memorial Day honors those who made the ultimate sacrifices on the fields of battle, in the skies and at sea, Veterans Day is different. On this day, we set aside our routine activities and pause to appreciate the men and women who have served this nation in uniform. This tradition of honoring our veterans began in 1919 as Armistice Day, to recognize those who died fighting in the First World War. Congress broadened the scope of this national holiday in 1954 to honor all veterans. While every American has been exposed to this holiday, there remains some confusion about just who we are honoring. Clearly, we take this opportunity to honor those veterans who fought in our nation's wars. Combat veterans are naturally the first people we think of this day, as we pay special homage to those who faced horrors of combat. They have earned our nation's deepest admiration. But a veteran is also that of a soldier, sailor, airman, Marine, and Coast Guardsman who served during peacetime, either on active duty or in the reserve components. Our veterans represent those who were drafted and those who voluntarily signed up. Some served their initial tour and returned to civilian life, while others made a career being in uniform. Also, this holiday rouses thoughts of the same veterans that we honored on Memorial Day, those who made the ultimate sacrifice, and therefore are absent from the celebrations such as this one. And finally, on this day, we appreciate those men and women serving in today's military, those who will be tomorrow's veterans. They have inherited the defense of the nation and stand guard in the shadow of their predecessors. Something unique to our veterans who fought during the Cold War is that the American practice at that time was to fight without a formal declaration. Many servicemen knew they had fought in a real war, but they often weren't treated as real veterans as a consequence. In spite of the formalities, more and more Americans are finally referring to the Korean and Vietnam Wars. Calling a war what it is has become a small tribute to what we pay to whom we send to represent our nation in brutal struggles. Tomorrow's veterans, today's soldiers, are not recognized as trusted warfighters, but they are also known as the champions of the homeland defense. For in today's world, our nation need not be at war for our military to be serving at great risk or hardship. Active duty and reserve soldiers throughout the United States have seen to the safety and relief of the American people when natural disasters strike, whether in time of flood, hurricane, earthquake, fire, or domestic disturbance. Our soldiers prepare for the worst. This summer, thousands of soldiers battled raging wildfires in Montana and Idaho. Others helped law enforcement personnel guard evacuated homes and route traffic around fire sites. These are our soldiers out there saving lives and saving the land.
Today we honor past, current, and future veterans. They do their jobs so well that we as a nation feel safe and secure from a very dangerous world. In fact, we feel so protected that it's easy to forget about those who have stood guard throughout the years. We lead busy lives, and it's natural, because we're all human, to lose our national memory or to overlook the meaning of their service. That is why holidays like this are so critically important. Just a little more than 3 months ago, on June 25th, the nation commemorated the 50th anniversary of the beginning of the Korean War in Washington, D.C. at the Korean War Veterans Memorial. Thousands of veterans and their families from that war, which is often referred to as the Forgotten War, stood in the hot summer sun that afternoon. They heard the president and other leaders assure them that their sacrifices are not forgotten. The 19 stainless steel statues, 14 soldiers, 1 sailor, 1 airman, and 3 Marines looked on as the words engraved in the nearby granite wall declared, "Freedom is not free." More than 1.5 million Americans served in Korea during the 3-year war, a war that successfully prevented North Korea from conquering the South. And since that time, many people who are now today's veterans stood guard to ensure the continued safety. Tomorrow's veterans are still on watch there, serving as a forceful deterrent during hardship tours away from their families. Tomorrow's veterans are also charged with tackling one of the grimmest realities ever to threaten America, bioterrorism. Disaster response teams are constantly rehearsing and preparing for quick reaction should a terrorist attack with biological agents ever hit American soil. Our nation's veterans, today's and tomorrow's, answer a very serious, very critical call. They defend American lives and principles abroad, as well as right here in the homeland.
Anniversaries such as this are but small tokens of a grateful nation. Meanwhile, a monument is being planned for our World War II veterans, who are now passing away from us at the rate of 1,000 a day. Our collective memory of them has recently been awakened. Tom Brokaw's The Greatest Generation illustrates veterans' contributions to building the nation during the post-war years, and Steven Spielberg's motion picture, Saving Private Ryan, paints a clear image of the horrible price of war, a price our veterans so bravely paid. Accounts such as these can leave no doubt, even for the casual observer, about the enormous debt that we owe to the men and women of the 1940s. Their service and sacrifices have no parallel in human history and have stood as a source of inspiration and awe for all of those who have tried to follow in their footsteps since the victories in 1945. We are a grateful nation, remembering veterans' sacrifices and service in both war and peace, in both far-off lands and right here on the American home front. Although a lot of today's veterans find comfort in the many veterans organizations scattered in every city and town across the country, they also want and need the understanding of non-veterans. While some veterans choose not to talk freely about their experiences, others wish to. A veteran wearing a baseball cap with the names of the wars, badges, and unit pins is probably someone who could welcome a friendly exchange from a civilian. You might ask veterans from the Vietnam War what years they were there, or if they hear from any of their old buddies. You needn't say a lot, but a little interest, a look of admiration or verbal recognition of their sacrifice can make a difference. In the case of the Vietnam War veteran, sometimes they need a nod of approval. It helps for them to know that you understand they were there at America's request, not theirs, and that they performed admirably. In fact, they performed superbly against the formidable odds of the guerrilla warfare and a determined enemy. You could even mention how you know they didn't get their due, but that people now realize their great contribution. Maybe you'll run into veterans of the Persian Gulf War. You might ask them how long they were deployed, or note how it was amazing that they responded so quickly to such a sudden and dramatic crisis. You could voice your relief that all the worst scenarios didn't play out, considering how soldiers spent many days and months waiting for much worse. Remember that thousands of casualties were expected during Desert Storm.
You might talk to a young soldier who just left the Army after serving in Bosnia, where he or she shielded a village from horrible violence and destruction. The point is that we should show our appreciation to all our veterans when the opportunity arises, not just on formal days of recognition such as today. We might step a little closer to what they experienced. We might convince them that we truly believe America is better because of the service and sacrifice, that not many of us could have stood up to what they endured. Today's veterans share wisdom that can only come from wartime experiences. Whether they returned from war as heroes or they were ignored or forgotten, they came home changed. As they adjust from their world of horror, of death, of mangled bodies, and unbearable misery, they craved an understanding nation. Whether or not they got the hero's welcome they deserved, it's not too late to show our appreciation now, today, and every day. Whether they continue to fight their battles through their nightmares and memories, or through more apparent physical or emotional disabilities, veterans deserve to know that we as a people honor their service. Please honor their sacrifice. Pay tribute each day to their irreplaceable gift to our nation. Take a moment to thank tomorrow's veterans. It's never too early to let them know how deeply we recognize their passionate commitment to keep America safe. Before we close today, I would like to ask all the veterans in the audience, today's and tomorrow's, to stand and be recognized. You guys want to stand up and be recognized? Knows only too well that freedom is not free. A grateful nation thanks you all.
Thank you, Spencer and Jennifer, Eric and Sarah. As Jennifer talked about in her part of the speech, the Korean War Memorial celebrated the 50th anniversary of the Korean War this year. And I had the privilege to attend the Korean War Memorial 2 years ago in Washington, D.C. And if you've ever been there, it's a remarkable memorial. As Jennifer stated, there's 19 larger-than-life figures. In fact, they're 1.5 times human size, so the figures are all very large and very startling. And they're infantrymen on patrol, and as Jennifer stated, there's 19 of them, and they're on patrol, so they're in a point figure, so there's a point man out front, and then there's 2 behind him, 3 behind him, 4, 3, and then 2 and 1. And I had the privilege to see and visit this memorial at about 9 o'clock on a Thursday evening. It was a wet, rainy, dreary, very depressing night, and you could see at that time in the statues of these 19 Korean War veterans, the anticipation, the fear in their eyes as they went through this rice paddy on patrol. And then we had the privilege to visit that memorial again on Friday morning, and the realization that it was completely different in the sunlight. Just a remarkable memorial, as all the war memorials are in Washington, D.C. But once again, they're there to honor our veterans, and as also been stated several times today, freedom is definitely not free. And I personally thank these gentlemen for being here with us today, and I'd like to have Matt come up, and Matt's going to read a poem entitled "Freedom is Not Free." This is a poem written by a high school student in Florida. Her name is Kelly, and Kelly Strong. Yeah. And so, freedom is not free.
freedom is not free. I watched the flag pass by one day. It fluttered in the breeze. A young Marine saluted it, and then he stood at ease. I looked at him in uniform, so young, so tall, so proud. With his hair cut square and his eyes alert, he'd stand out in any crowd. I thought of how many men like him had fallen through the years. How many died on foreign soil? How many mothers' tears? How many pilots' planes shot down? How many died at sea? How many foxholes were soldiers' graves? No, freedom is not free. I heard the sound of taps one night, when everything was still. I listened to the bugler play and felt a sudden chill. I wondered just how many times the taps had meant amen, when a flag had draped a coffin of a brother or a friend. I thought of all the children, of the mothers and the wives, of fathers, sons, and husbands with interrupted lives. I thought about a graveyard at the bottom of the sea, of unmarked graves in Arlington. No, freedom is not free.
I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Ms. Lamphere and the choir and Mr. Roloff and the band, and how about a nice round of applause for their performance today. I'd also like to thank Mrs. Stubbe for being accompanying us. And I'd really be remiss today if I did not have the ladies of the auxiliary who are with us today. And a lot of times the women behind the men are forgotten, and I'm not saying that only men defended or have defended our country, but we've got a group of ladies here today that I'd like to have them stand and receive a round of applause also. Thank you, ladies. I'd also like to thank Elizabeth Platt, Ann Brandner, Brad Loffenberg, Michelle Clark, Jimmy Kastner, Spencer Giese, Jennifer Leckerhan, Eric Solberg, and Sarah Gower for presenting our program today. How about a nice round of applause for all of them? And finally, last but not least, I'd especially like to thank the student body here today for not only your attendance, but especially your attention. Thank you very much, and you are dismissed to fifth hour. Thank you.